That work?
Yeah. So start with your name, say and spell, and your title, sir.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Kelly Black, Kelly-Black. I'm the commander. Okay, make sure I've got clearance here. I'm the commander of the 51st Weapons of Mass Destruction Civil Support Team. Every state has a team like this. We have 22 members. Of those, 4 are Air Force and the rest are Army. And what we're here for is domestic counterterrorism. So what we look at is we're an extra level of protection. So when you have the police or law enforcement that find something that isn't quite what they're used to dealing with, whether they find chemicals on a scene or they find something that is unusually hazardous. So if their hazmat team comes through and sees something that is just out of scale, then they are able to call upon us to help with things. Like the suits that you're seeing that are coming through there right now, they are beyond the capability of the normal hazmat suit. The standard hazmat suit would very commonly be able to handle most chemicals for several hours, but there are some rare chemicals that are extraordinarily reactive, and those very reactive chemicals will burn through the normal orange suit like most hazmat teams have relatively quickly. So a particular chemical that is used for industrial purposes and at the universities for teaching, they usually have a tiny quantity of it, but it's not good to store it for a long period of time because eventually it can eat through its storage container. So we had a call for some advice on how that they should handle a response if they were to have a spill or a breach. What you're seeing is they're practicing using their air monitoring equipment as they're going indoors, so to actually check a scene. Pardon me? So when the university called us up and said, hey, we would like to know what precautions to use, could you give us some advice? So we started talking to them about our more advanced equipment and more advanced tools and protection level, like these metallic looking suits that you see here. Now these, whereas the standard suit might only be able to last 15 minutes, something like this can do, let's say, 90 to their question. So what they're doing right now is they're basically doing a standard set where they're evaluating what is in the room and figuring out what is the hazard. So as a Weapons of Mass Destruction Civil Support Team, our primary purpose is to identify the hazard, support local law enforcement, support local fire departments, support local hazmat teams, or industry, so that they when they have something that they don't recognize, we can figure out what it is and we can give them the advice on how to best handle it. As an example, this is in this exercise, what we're reviewing is that an abandoned building, someone left chemicals in it. And when the security guard came back the next day, he said, these do not belong here. So what they're looking at is, let's figure out what it is and then give us some advice on what we should do about it. And of course, we're working with local law enforcement, Sheriff Zybert, which I'm hoping I'm not mispronouncing Greg's last name. But he's been really good to work with and to help us to work with him. We've coordinated with the Marquette Fire Department, and they were out front. I don't know if you caught them on screen or not, but they were here too. So we coordinate with local law enforcement and also with fire departments and have these kinds of exercises monthly. We also work at all the massively populated events to provide another layer of protection so that if something were to be questionable, we can identify it and say, is this something you need to worry about? So when we're dealing with the state police, when we're working with the FBI, Secret Service, and we're just doing sweeps, going through saying, is there something in the air? Is there something in the building? You know, what's going on? And it helps them have that extra level of security. that extra level of assurance. What they're doing with their gloves, ironically, is they've got 2 levels of gloves on the inside, the gloves that are made onto the suit, and an outer layer of gloves. And as they're working through their instrumentation, and what they'll end up doing is peeling them off and replacing them as they go with each layer, because they're absolutely meticulous in ensuring that they're careful in not causing a hazard and not cross-contaminating. So when we were talking about it earlier, you were asking me about the trucks that we had and the equipment that we have outside. What we have first our advanced our Admon vehicle, and that advanced vehicle provides us with a whole range of communication gear. We have our 400 megahertz radios, which we use to commonly talk with the fire departments. We have our 800s, which talk with state and federal law enforcement. We've got satellite phones, and we can also have commercial internet as well as military internet. And that's in one single truck that we use when we first arrive on scene and start working with, whether it's the local industry or the local law enforcement or local fire department. When they invite us and they say, hey, we want you, then we come. So that truck is the first thing that's on scene. We have a second truck that has all of that, but it also has it has military internet. It has a separate compartments for one level of security above standard military internet. So you see the satellite dish on top. That's what that's all about. And it has the working compartments inside for when you're working with that. Let me step back a little bit so they can hear each other. Some of that is just some of the standard equipment. That's air monitoring. But as we talked about, it looks at what is in the air. It's basically kind of a sniffer. The other equipment we have on the truck, like you talked about your standard hazmat fire departments. Well, we have the same equipment they have, but we have more detailed sensors. Like you might have, fire department might have a 5-gas detector. Well, beyond that, that's your standard PID, and that's a photoionization detector. Well, we also have other things like they might have an Ahura, which uses light and it bounces it off the chemical, and by the way it reacts to the light, we're able to determine what the chemical is. But we also have mobile laboratories that are able to take just the vapors from the air, and we have gas chromatograph mass spectrometers, GCMS, so that actually are the same thing you'd see in most laboratory settings, but ours are mobile. We have the mobile laboratory out back. It's that massive 20-foot container with a slide out on the side, and it has inside of it 2 very large glove boxes, and it also has PCR for biological threats, because the same thing you're seeing for chemical threats, we are also trained and equipped for the most common biological threats. So we're not worried about the common cold. We're not worried about that kind of thing. We're worried about things that can be weaponized, and most things cannot be turned into a weapon. It's very difficult to do. So our biggest, we don't spend a lot of energy in focusing on something that is extraordinarily difficult to weaponize. So we don't do testing for the flu. We have had our scientists support the state laboratory in their efforts, though. Beyond that, our other equipment that we have on hand, we've got communications, we have our mobile laboratory, we have our survey equipment, which are like hazmat rescue trucks. And I think beyond that, the only thing we haven't talked about is it's not really an ambulance, but it has some of the specialized gear for the military that if we were to find something that was a weapon, to take care of our folks